Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening from wherever you're calling in from around the globe today. Welcome to today's webinar on how to address people and change during your digital transformation. My name is January Polk, and I will be conducting today's webinar. I am a director at Panorama over client services and operations, and I have my background in business management administrations. I also got my certification in ProSci, and I'm also Lean Six Sigma certified. I started out in manufacturing many years ago, and then moved up through the business process outsourcing companies and helped implement process improvement and change and training and quality across all the different sites around the world. And then moved over to Panorama and have helped them build up their business process management and change management methodologies. So it's my pleasure to be able to do the webinar for you today. Just a couple of quick things before we get started. The webinar is being recorded, and so you will receive a link to the recording after the webinar. We do encourage you to ask questions throughout the webinar, so I will leave time at the end for question and answers. And then in terms of a quick agenda, I'm going to start out by giving you a little introduction about Panorama Consulting Solutions, and then I'll go over some of the things we want you to take away from this particular webinar. And then we'll get into it. We'll start talking about how do you manage the human aspect of a business transformation. And from our experience, and because we do expert witness testimony as one of our service offerings, we are often called in to look at why implementations have failed. And a lot of the reasons they fail is because of lack of change management. So I want to go through the 5 lessons that we've learned through our experience of doing expert witness of why business transformations might fail. And then I'll wrap it up. We're talking a little bit about when you should do change management within your transformation project. And again, we'll leave some time at the end for questions. Okay, a little bit about Panorama. So we are Panorama, and what that means is we have a wealth of knowledge among us. We approach all of our projects from a team-based approach, meaning we have particular people within the organization that have a subject matter expertise in specific areas. And so we bring those people in when the time is right to do specific functions within a project. So again, using that team-based approach, we do many different types of projects. We've helped companies look at their enterprise system strategy. We help companies identify and put together their digital transformation strategy and implement it. We also help companies do software evaluation and selection. So if you're looking at changing out a technology, we have a bench strength of individuals who are very experienced with different technologies that can help you go through that process of evaluating and selecting that right technology. We can also help with the implementation of that technology from a project management oversight perspective. So we'll work on the side of the client and make sure that vendors or implementation partners are following methodology, producing quality deliverables, and raise any red flags if they are not. We also help with the organizational change management across all different types of projects, transformations or ERP implementations, or sometimes just a standalone OCM project, as well as business process management. So oftentimes we're called in to help companies identify what their strategy is, how they want to deliver value to their customers, and then we guide them through a process of making sure that they have the best practice processes in place to deliver that value, and then help them identify what types of things they might need to enable that value. So if it's a technology or if it's outsourcing or just improving specific processes within their organization. We also help with project recovery and expert witness, as I stated, because we're agnostic and we're not tied to any particular vendor. We are often called into large, high-profile court cases, lawsuits, to provide our expert witness leadership and thoughts into why a particular implementation may have failed. We also do independent verification and validation, which is, again, just making sure implementers are following a methodology and a process, and also project management office type functions within your transformation projects. We do have a breadth of knowledge in a variety of different industries. Some of them are listed here. We've got manufacturing, distribution, professional services. We've worked a lot in government, nonprofit, as well as healthcare, medical supplies, retail, energy, agriculture, and food and beverage. And like I mentioned, we are Panorama, so we have a global base of consultants around the world with a variety of different experiences, over 20 years of experience in different industries, consulting and vendor experience that we bring to the table to help you with your projects. Our consultants are also oftentimes certified either in Lean Six Sigma, or they may have their PMP or their ProSci, or they have their MBAs or APIC certification. And then we at Panorama put our consultants through a 360-degree ERP certification program as well. So everybody is trained on the same methodology for consistency purposes, so that if anybody were to leave throughout your project, someone could potentially pick it back, or would pick it back up and be able to continue forward, because we do follow the same methodology and approach across all of our project teams. And we also bring to the table a broad and deep ERP experience. So I mentioned we have a team that's dedicated to just keeping up on the latest and greatest technology out there, and trends, and different types of softwares, and what's going on with those particular softwares, and what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses. So if you're looking at choosing a new technology to augment your transformation, or you're just looking to upgrade your technology because it's old and it's a green screen and antiquated, we do have that knowledge that we bring to the table, and we can help you select that right software for your organization. Okay, so that's a little bit about Panorama. Next, I want to cover a little bit about what we want to talk about in today's webinar. Obviously, we're talking about how to address people and change during your digital transformation, but in particular, we really want to compare the benchmarks that we've seen across not only ERP projects, but all of our business projects, and why they succeed versus those that fail. So what are those key differences? Also want to discuss the critical success factors related to any kind of implementation, especially as it relates to organizational change management. Like I mentioned, I want to go through what are some of the 5 common change management challenges we've seen in implementations and why they may fail. And then finally wrap it up with a recommendation of different change management tools and approaches you can use to deal with these types of challenges. All right, so managing the human aspect of a business transformation. This is one of my favorite slides. It's whenever you ask people who wants to change, everybody wants to change. They don't want to be working in the status quo. However, when you ask them the important question of who wants to change, all the hands usually go down. So people want change, but when it comes down to the heart of it, people don't like to change. And so it's a very fearful type of mentality. And so a lot of times you start to then run into what we call is the change curve. So you might be familiar with Fisher's change curve, but what it says is that humans innately don't like change. And so no matter what kind of change we're going through, whether it's a personal change in our life or a business change, we all move through this change curve. And what happens is initially we're excited and we may have a little anxiety, but we're very excited about this change. It's something new. It's going to bring something better. But as we start to go down the path of change and understanding what it will entail, you start to find people get a little fearful. They might feel that their jobs are threatened. They might feel a little bit of depression because it's so overwhelming and a lot is changing and they're not sure how this type of change is going to impact them. So we call that the valley of despair. And then eventually, as you begin to train, you begin to expose people to whatever the new technology or whatever the new business process is, they start to gradually accept it and move forward. Again, no matter what, people will go through this curve. That's our natural tendency. However, if you do the right change management activities, it can make that curve a little less steep, kind of flattens that curve out so that the road up to acceptance is less of a climb than what might be if you don't take care of the people or do any change management at all. So it's really important to really acknowledge that the change is happening, what it means for these individuals, and what do you need to do as an organization to help move them through that change as quickly and as comfortably as possible. So what are the 5 lessons that we've learned from our expert witness failures? Well, first I want to kind of start out by talking about what are some of the top reasons for process business implementation failures. The first is the lack of management commitment from the top down. What you'll find is that if you don't have that top level commitment, then the rest of the organization will not follow, because the top management or executives are the ones who are going to push down the what's in it for the company, down to the what's in it for the manager, down to the what's in it for the employee. They're also going to be the ones who are going to be able to allow people to participate on the project, make it so that people have that time in their schedule to be on the project team, that they're backfilled, or if it's a priority for top management, then they're going to make sure that you're going to have the resources to be able to implement this process or technology project. The second reason we see projects fail is that organizations don't have their eyes wide open, or they have unrealistic expectations about what to expect in terms of budget, in terms of time commitment from people and resources, in terms of timeline. So what's really important is, as you're starting to plan to get approval for these types of projects, to really do your due diligence in understanding what is it going to take to implement this business technology, and what is it going to take from a not only a timeline perspective, but from a resource perspective and from a cost perspective. A lot of times we see organizations say that, we're not going to spend more than $500,000 on this, and you need to get it implemented within 3 or 4 months, and that might not be realistic. So when you do that and you put that kind of pressure, you start to cut corners and make mistakes that end up costing you more time in the long run, or result in higher costs of redoing things or having to redo things because you didn't do it right the first time. So doing the right project planning up front, so you can set those realistic expectations, will really set you and your project team up for success. Inadequate project resources. A lot of companies are lean, and so they don't have the ability to dedicate people to a project like this 100% at a time. But implementations are long, and they are tedious, and they take a lot of work. So if you don't have, commitment from your top management or your executives to allocate people to the project full time, then you want to make sure that you're taking that into account with your timeline when you're setting those realistic expectations. So you can't tell executives you're going to get something implemented in a year if they're not going to give you the team or project resources to do it. So something that might take a year, if you're only allowed to use people 25, 50% at a time, might take you 2 to 3 years to implement. And the best ideal situation is if you can backfill these project resources so that they can support the project full time. Obviously, that's utopia and something that you would want to strive for, but we all know that that's not always a reality. The fourth is resistance to change and lack of employee buy-in. So you can put the best technology into place, you can implement the best process improvement, but if the people are not bought into it, they're not going to utilize whatever the improvement is or, adhere to that new improved process, or they're not going to use the technology. So you're going to end up not achieving the benefits you've set out to achieve as part of this type of implementation. So it's really important to involve people in the process along the way. Sooner, earlier, often is better, so that you get that buy-in from them as you're going through the process. They feel heard, and then they're going to use whatever this new process is or this new technology is once it is implemented. Poor project planning, we talked a little bit about that. Not having governance in place to hold people accountable, not giving people specific or identifying roles and responsibilities so that you can hold people accountable. All of that goes into good project planning. Failure to track business benefits and the return on investment. So at the end of the day, after your executives have spent all of this money implementing whatever this new system may be or process, they're going to want to know, well, how did this benefit our company or our organization? Show me the value, show me the return on investment. If you don't think about that ahead of time and plan for it and identify the business benefits, how you're going to measure that, then you're not going to be able to report it back to the executives, and they might see it as a failed ERP or business process transformation. Inadequate training and education. Again, when you start to creep on timeline and you're running up against a budget constraints, the first thing people want to do is cut out training and education. Conference room pilots, that's the last thing you want to do, because it's within the conference room pilots and the training that people are really starting to get a feel for how the system is going to work, learning how to trust the system, learning or being able to see the data conversion and that data is accurate. Things like that that go a long way into buy-in get cut. And that's, again, the worst thing you can do. So you want to make sure that in your project plan and throughout the project, you're doing the right amount of training and education to bring people along. Poor project management and controls, talked a little bit about that, and not leveraging the A team from the business. So when we talk about inadequate project resources, the people that you want to put on your project are and should be the A team. They are the people that know the business the best. They know the ins and outs of it, and they're going to be the ones who are going to be able to provide the best input to the designers during that design phase that's going to be used to build your system. So, or design a new process, whatever it may be. So you really want to make sure that you have those 18 players. And I know a lot of times companies don't want to pull them out of the business to work on this because that's why they do so well within operations. But for something that is this critical, it's really important to utilize those individuals. So make sure you utilize them and that you're able to backfill them with other resources so that they can put in the time needed to make your project a success. And then lastly is poor employee communications. If you don't communicate anything, people will make stuff up. And usually when people make stuff up, it's not positive. So you really want to make sure that you've got a good communication plan and that you're communicating to all your stakeholder groups appropriately at the right times with the right frequency and highlighting the right messages. So we talked a little bit about a broad spectrum of reasons why process and technology projects fail, but let's go into a couple of the 5 key lessons that we found are big components in the project failures. So the first one we talked about on the previous slide was that top level management commitment. That is it. So lesson number 1, leadership and executive sponsorship. I think this is number 1. If you don't have this, your project will fail. I've seen projects where you have executive teams of 6 to 9 people on them, and only 10% of the team is bought into doing this type of project. Well, that's not going to set you up for success. So, what are the top 5 common executive mistakes that we see? Well, the first one is that they fail to remain visible and engaged throughout the project. Um, and going hand in hand with that is their failure to demonstrate support for the project in words and actions. So those kind of go hand in hand. So what typically happens is when you start on this new big transformation, the executives are all bought in and they're rah-rah, and you might have this company meeting where they're talking about this business transformation project and how great it is and why you're doing it for the organization. But then they'll disappear and they'll fall out of the limelight. So you never see or hear from them again. That is the biggest mistake, because what happens is the organization sees that as my executive is no longer involved or engaged, so I don't need to be involved or engaged. Or my executive is no longer involved and engaged, so this project must not be important to them. So it's really important to keep them active, visible, and participating throughout the entire project. And you can do this in several ways. You can hold regular meetings with your executive sponsor. You can to give them updates so that they can make timely decisions and address things timely. You can also help them by putting calendars, invites on, or by putting things on their calendars, like to walk the halls, to talk to people. So every Wednesday from 9 to 10, that executive, that CEO do it is when they're talking to people one-on-one, how they can relate this project to that person and why it's important and beneficial for that individual that they're talking to is really key, as well as communicating why it's important for the organization. And if the organization achieves all of these benefits, then what does that mean for the employee that they are talking to, or that they are trying to develop that what's in it for them for? So really important that they build that coalition of sponsorships with their peers and their managers, and that they're communicating directly with the employees about the project, how people are feeling, what's in it for them, why is it important to the employee. The last thing that executives do that we find can be detrimental to a project is that they delegate their sponsorship role and responsibilities out to someone else. This, again, keeps them from being visible and active, and it keeps you from being able to hold them accountable. So as your sponsor's coach, you need to make sure that you're holding them accountable for their role and responsibility in the project, which is set up front at the beginning. You explain to them, as a sponsor, this is your role, this is what you need to do, and this is when you need to do it. And if you can help support them by creating communications or setting up meetings for them, or meeting with them weekly or bi-weekly to give them updates on the project, to be able to get them to make critical business decisions quickly to keep the project moving. In addition to all of that, if you identify what their role is and what you're going to be holding them accountable for, then you can start to hold them accountable. Then you can make sure that they're not delegating these sponsorship roles out to anybody else. And again, circle back, it keeps them active, visible, and participating throughout the entire initiative. So what should they be doing at different periods within the project? Well, we've divided it into 3 stages. So the first stage is your planning stage. Then you go into your design stage where you're designing the blueprint for the system or the new process, and then you implement. And there's 3 pillars of management or employees within a company. So you have your project team that is specific to this particular project. You have your managers and leadership, and then you have your employees. During the planning phase, the leadership or executive sponsors should be securing project resources for the project team. They should be building management support within their managers or amongst their managers. and then starting to create awareness across the organization to their employees that this change is coming and this is what it means. In the design phase, they should now start to provide direct resources to the project. So now these people are backfilled and they can participate on this project X amount of time. They're starting to develop sponsorship within their across their managers, amongst their managers, and now they're starting to educate the employees, either by involving employees in the process or doing town halls or company meetings, whatever is needed to start to educate people on this particular initiative. And then during the implementation, they're doing things to maintain momentum within the project team. Because, like I said, it's a marathon, it's a long process, and people get burned out. So, what can the executives do to celebrate quick wins, reward those project team members so that they maintain momentum to keep the project moving? At the manager level, they are now aligning leadership and managing resistance. So now they know where their pockets of resistance are, whether in groups or individuals, and they're starting to help their managers coach through that resistance to try and convert people, those resistors, over to acceptance. And then employees, they're starting to reinforce and reward. So the employees that are impacted or contribute to the overall success of this project, they're starting to educate on those quick wins, reward the employees based on those quick wins to kind of keep that momentum going. Okay, lesson 2. The second failure that we see, or critical success factor within an implementation of any type, is connecting the people side of change with project success. If the people don't change how they do their job, then it doesn't matter what specific changes are implemented. You could put the best software in place or implement the best process, but like I said, if people don't adhere to it, you won't achieve the benefit. What often happens is that leadership will have these great objectives for doing this transformation. You know, it's going to reduce their costs, or it's going to help them come up with new service concepts, or gain process efficiencies, or improve technologies. But to the employee, that means something different. To the employee, it means they're going to have to learn some new skills potentially. There's going to be new expectations expected of them. They don't know what the new and unknown tasks are going to be associated with the transformation. It might be a change in their work environment. Maybe they're going to move to a different location or in a different team. Today they might have authority, and this new change might decrease that, or take away some of that authority. Maybe they lose status, or they think they're losing status. The key point is that, they feel it differently. What they hear from the executives, they internalize quite differently than what the leadership team is saying. And so what results is this unintended consequence. So that's where you start to see those pockets of resistance rise up, and people are fearful, so they're not going to learn the new process, or they're not going to do the training, or they're going to talk negatively about this project amongst their peers. That can also cause slow implementation. So if they're not on board and they're trying to sabotage the project, then that could keep the implementation from moving forward. You might experience quality problems because if they're not doing their job well, then they're not going to take time and care to produce quality reports, or you put information into the system or into the process correctly, so you'll have those quality issues. You'll see reduced productivity, reduced commitment. So again, most of this dealing with resistance, because people, like I said, internalize things a little bit differently. So what can you do to get behind that and help them through this process so that you make that employee impact not as scary and frightening? Well, the first thing is come up with a project name, brand the project, get people involved, have them design logos, have them come up with names, have a contest, reward, so that now when you're talking about this project, everybody knows what it's about. The next thing is that understanding the purpose of it. So clearly defining why the company is changing, why they're doing some type of transformation, business, technology, and what is in it for those people. Not just the company, but what is in it for those individual people or departments. And then you want to communicate the particulars. So what is going to be changing? Sometimes it's not the entire organization. Sometimes it might be one area within the organization. However, that area might impact others downstream or might be impacted by others upstream. So you want to understand and communicate to every stakeholder what is changing and what is going to be required of all those stakeholders to make this change possible, and then who will be changing. So who are the individuals who will be changing, and what are you going to do to address those changes within those individuals? It's very important to put together coaching plans by the individuals so that you're addressing each person separately, because it's not a one-size-fits-all type of an approach. So project name, purpose, particulars, and people, the 4 Ps, help you connect the people side of the change with overall project success. Lesson number 3, time for change actions and resources. This is specifically talking about having a dedicated change management team. So yes, you need to have resources, your A-team players that are participating on the project and providing input into the overall design of the system or project or business process, etc. But you should also have people dedicated to managing the change associated with this project. So you might have individuals dedicated to managing your communications or your communication plan that you design. You might have individuals dedicated to managing training and making sure everybody's trained and that you're doing the right types of training for the different individuals across the organization. If you don't have dedicated individuals, then you do neglect those change activities and you put your project at risk for failure because, like I mentioned, people will not be bought in. They're not going to come along with you. They're going to go through that change curve and they're going to get stuck in that valley of despair, and it's going to be harder to pull them out of it. So that could lead to project failure. A lot of times companies will say, okay, well, we're lean, understand the importance of change management, but what are you talking about from a resource standpoint? How many resources do I need? And of course, that's dependent on your organization and how large you are. If you're a global organization with sites in different countries, then you're going to want to have a larger change management team. You're probably going to want to have dedicated people located at each location who's managing these major change management activities that roll up to an overall change management team. If you are in a situation where you've gone through many changes and they've all failed, and you've got a lot of negative attitude amongst the organization, how people have seen change go in the past, you might have to have more people on your change management team. Maybe you have a dedicated change management person for each department. Or the particular departments that experience whatever failure happened in previous projects. What phase your project is in. So there's a lot of different considerations you need to take into account when you're putting together a change management team. If you're a smaller organization, maybe you just need one person. Maybe you need one person 50% of the time. The point is that you should have someone dedicated to managing the change management activities, and the number of activities that need to be managed and the time commitment to manage those activities is dependent within your organization. And yes, what are some of the top reasons why people say they can't change or they can't not change, why they can't put dedicated people focused on change management activities. Of course, there's always the budget. We're a lean organization. We don't have resources, or our resources don't have that skill set. So train them or bring in third-party resources who can help supplement that skill set if you don't have it in-house. If you have dedicated resources on your project managing change, then you will have a higher success rate than those projects that don't have any dedicated individuals managing any type of change within their initiative, across their initiative. Lesson number 4, understanding and managing resistance. This is a tricky one because resistance is something that you can see. You can see it in people's body language. You can hear it in the negative comments that they make. But the problem is you don't know where that resistance is coming from or the root cause of it. So that's the main takeaway when it comes to resistance. If you see resistance, you need to figure out why those people, person, department, location is resistant. And then you can start to get your hands around it and tackle it and put a plan together to help manage it. So like I said, you can see it through behavior, lack of buy-in. Sometimes you might have change champions that are out and about that advocate this change, that hear the conversations around the water cooler, that can give you insight into where resistance might be, pockets of resistance might be within an organization. You can use anonymous feedback tools, surveys, email, social media, any way that you can get feedback through organizational channels is going to give you insight into where resistance might be and the root cause of that resistance, why people might be resistant. Or you conduct meetings, interviews, and focus groups with an independent third party where people are going to be likely to open up and talk about their concerns. Some of the primary reasons for resistance, well, the first is lack of awareness. Sometimes people don't understand what the change is how it's going to impact their current job role. Maybe the organization's past performance would change, like I was saying. If they've done a bad job in the past, then people might not feel like they're going to do a good job with this new project. Lack of visible support and commitment from the leadership and manager teams, people follow in suit. So if their managers are resistant or not bought in, then they are going to not be bought in either. The overall corporate culture and the fear of job loss. People just don't, they think that whatever this change is going to eliminate their job. So what can you do to deal with resistance? Well, first of all, listen and understand the objections. Try to help people focus on what is changing and not the how, and try and get them to let go of the how, because the how isn't important. It's what needs to change and why it needs to change. And as long as you can address that and make sure that those needs are being met by that particular employee, then the how is irrelevant. You want to remove barriers. So if a person is not feeling like they're being heard, involve them in the process. Allow them time to sit in on specific meetings so that they can learn about it, or training so that they feel like they have the right training to be able to support you and your company in this initiative. Provide simple, clear choices and consequences. If you don't change, this will happen. Create hope. Show the benefits at the employee level. How is this going to help them in their current job? What does that mean? Can they be promoted? Will they be able to do things that are more exciting for them instead of managing 100 Excel spreadsheets? Could they potentially get a reward because now you have metrics that you can tie to some type of compensation for them? Show the benefits. That's key. Make a personal appeal. Do a stakeholder assessment and understand who your biggest and strongest dissenters are and how can you convert them. Why are they resistant, and what can you do to move them over to the acceptance category? And then, of course, the last choice, which we don't recommend, but often, companies might have to do this, is create a sacrificial lamb. So someone who is so resistant that is derailing the project, then you may have to get rid of that person from the organization to show that if you don't get bought in, then you could potentially have to leave the company in the future. What are some of the things you can do to help deal with resistance and proactively? Link changes to the organizational vision, growth, strategies, and values. Tie it to their compensation. Create clear, honest, two-way communications. Have an open door policy where people can come in and share their concerns openly with no fear of retaliation. Involve everybody early on in the process and often. So when you're starting to talk about your current state and the pain points, if you're improving a process, involve people who touch that process upstream, in the process, downstream, so that their input is taken into account, and involve them in designing that desired state. If it's technology, involve them in the process of defining requirements and help them and allow them to attend demonstrations where they can view the software and how the software is going to meet those requirements. These types of steps, by bringing people in, end users in early on, really go a long way into gaining acceptance and decreasing the amount of resistance you might feel across the organization. And then, of course, having manager and supervisor engagement is really key, because those people are going to coach and bring their employees along with the organization through this project. All right, the final lesson, communicate. So I talked about how companies will do a bad job at communicating. And so people, when left in a vacuum and lack of information, they'll make stuff up. So what do? The first thing is you want to do a stakeholder assessment to identify all your different audiences. And then, depending on where they fall within your stakeholder assessment grid, will define their communication strategy. So every stakeholder will get their own strategy, and that means that key messaging will be defined based on that stakeholder particular based on that strategy, and what types of messaging and when these types of messaging have to occur and how they have to occur will all be identified, so that you have a good, robust communication plan that is being delivered by senior leadership and project leads, that is being tied back to strategic goals and vision, that's being customized based on the audience, because all people don't need to know the same information. Your project team needs to know different information than your executive team. Your executive team needs to know different information than your end users. So making sure that you customize the messaging and that you are customize the messaging and make it unique to each phase of the project. So you want to message about, yes, what the business is today. You want to message things about the change. You want to message about the change impacts to the people and the workforce. And you want to provide status updates and progress reports. So when you're putting together your communication plan, some of the key things you're going to be identifying is timing, how you're going to package the message, who is going to deliver and send that message. So brand the project, make it more than just an IT project or a particular project for a particular department. Your timing of messaging is going to depend on, the size of the particular change or the impact on the employees and the readiness of the organization. You want to package it into manageable components, package it correctly. Everything doesn't need to be delivered at once. Some things need to be delivered in sections, right? Because it's a lot of information that you're trying to talk through. Same with delivery methods. You don't want to use the same delivery method because people will become desensitized to it. So you want to change it out. Some communications might require a face-to-face. If you're communicating change impacts to someone's role, that's probably more done face-to-face versus an email. Some things can be done via email, town halls, bulletin update boards, etc. The idea is that you mix it up and you deliver the right messaging using the right delivery method. And then, of course, sender, make sure you have the right sender. Business messages being sent should come from the CEO or executives. And then personal messages can come from the department heads or employee supervisors. Make sure that your communication plan has all of these elements: that who is the audience, that it talks about what the key messages are that need to be delivered, when they should be delivered, where this is going to take place, and how the message is going to be sent. And this is an example of a communication plan. So you see it has the timing, the communication to be delivered, why it's being delivered, who it's being delivered to, how it's being delivered, who's going to be responsible for preparing it and sending it, and then any additional notes. And once you put together your communication plan, this can become your Bible throughout the entire implementation. And then you have someone dedicated to making sure that these communications are happening with the right frequency to the right groups. Okay, so when should change management happen? The integration task told what is expected of them, and then you can go back and hold these senior leaders accountable for the engagement. What does an effective change management plan look like? So one of the key things is you have to start out doing an assessment. And the assessment is really going to help you identify where your opportunities are and where your strengths are. So you want to capitalize on the things that you do well, but you also want to understand what your opportunities and weaknesses are so that you can put the right change management plan together that is specific for your organization. Once you understand what needs to be done from a communication and alignment standpoint, you do your stakeholder assessment, and then you create a robust communication plan. Again, assigning out to individuals and holding them accountable for those communications. You want to also make sure that you're addressing the change impacts. So you want to make sure that you're identifying and understanding where the change impacts are going to happen, and what the new workforce transition plan looks like, and how to address those changes, either by doing coaching plans, either by putting together more training for individuals, having them participate in conference room pilots for technology implementations. There's different ways to address the change impacts, but that's a key component to any change management plan. Benefit realization, again, making sure that people understand the what's in it for them, and that there's a strategy in identifying these benefits and how you're going to measure them, so that you can start to hold people accountable to achieving these benefits, so that when you need to go back to the board or the executives, you have the confidence and you have the data that shows, yes, we did achieve those benefits that we set out to achieve. And here's your return on investment. And then training, understanding, and knowing that every organization has a different training strategy, and you want to put together the right training strategy for your company. So make sure that through that assessment, you understand how people want to be trained, what works well with your organization, what's worked well in the past, and what do you think will work well moving forward, and that you have that right plan in place. And then once training is done, that you have a way of assessing and doing refreshers if needed. So the elements of a good change management plan: first, do a readiness, understand where you're weak, where you have opportunities, what you can leverage as strengths. Put together a communication plan and execute, understand your change impacts, address them. Define a benefits realization plan, get measurements before so you have something to measure against after, and then training. Train. Do not cut this out of your project plan, because it can be very detrimental and really put you at risk for a project failure. Okay, so what are the greatest contributors for project success? Again, just to recap, from all of the failures we've talked about, all the reasons projects might fail, all of our experience with expert witness, the things you want to make sure that you do in your project. If you do anything else, keep your leadership active and visible. Set them up for success. Be their coach, be their mentor. Show them what needs to get done and make it easy for them because they are busy and they're out there trying to run the business. So anything you can do by preparing communications or setting up meetings for them, updating them, is critical. Keep them active and visible. Having a structured change management approach. So understanding that there are specific change management activities you have to do within your project, and then do them. Put together a structure and a plan, assign roles and responsibilities, and hold people accountable. Have a dedicated change management team or resources. Again, it could be 50% of one person's time. It could be a team of 10 people, a team of 5 people, a team of 2. Whatever makes sense for your organization. But make sure someone is managing your change management activity. Having open communications about the change and what is needed for the change. Again, walk the halls, have your leadership walk the halls, have your managers be good sponsors, and communicate often to their employees about what's happening, the status of the project, what's coming up, how is this going to impact their employees. Very, very important. And having that open door communication so people can come and talk to you about their concerns at any time. Engage your employees and participation throughout the entire project from the beginning all the way through to the end. And then make sure that you integrate change management activities when you send out communications, when you do trainings, when you do coaching, when you do specific resistance management tasks, whatever it may be. Make sure that those change management activities are incorporated into your overall project plan and that they don't get left out and forgotten. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our webinar for today on addressing people and change during your digital transformation. I did promise that we would do some questions, so I will take a few questions here. Excuse me. But before I get to the questions, I do want to let you know that every year we do several boot camps. And this year we just finished our one in May in Chicago, and we have another one coming up in the fall that I believe is going to be held in Denver, Colorado. And so we welcome anyone who's interested to check our website. We're still finalizing dates. It'll be in September, October sometime. But it's a great opportunity for you to get some intense and interactive training around business process work. How do you optimize? How do you do a value chain? How do you do strategy workshops within your organization to help your company understand how it's going to deliver value in this new world? We talk about change management, the people. What are the different steps you need to take to address people within any kind of business transformation or technology? And we also address technology. So if you're looking to implement a technology solution and want to know how you go about selecting and implementing, what have we learned, how can we help support you, that's also really important and comes out in those sessions. So it's a great opportunity to learn from experts, to collaborate with peers, other companies who have gone through it, and have learnings to share. You can also get 10 CPE credits as well. So I encourage you to continue to check back at our website for the exact dates that this is happening in September, October. And please come out and join us. It's a great opportunity, and we get a lot of positive feedback from them. Okay, so let me take a couple of questions. So one of the questions that we have here is change management different if you are implementing on-premise versus cloud-based ERP? And I would tell you no. Because like I said, change happens even if you're going through a personal experience. Like if you're getting married or you're changing jobs, you're having a new baby. Um, the same thing has to happen, right? You need to communicate. You need to understand what's going to happen, what's going to change. You need to have training on how to do that change or what the new world is going to be. So that comes back to systems. So whether you're doing an on-premise versus a cloud, it's the same thing. You know, it's a change, and so any change you need to understand how ready the person is who's going through it. You need to make sure that they understand the what's in it for them. You need to provide communication and understanding about where you're at in the process. You need to provide training. So, no matter what, whether it's a business transformation or technology, on premise or cloud or personal, change management is the same. It's the same steps, it's the same process to help mitigate that change curve and get people out of that valley of despair and feeling threatened to feeling accepted and to feeling better about it and accepting the change. Um, the next question is, how do you tackle getting employee buy-in when one effect of a successful program will be the ability to make do with fewer employees? So that's a tough one because a lot of people think of that when you're doing any kind of change, technology business, that means that you're reducing staff. I would say that yes, you want to be able to do something with fewer employees, but in all of my cases, in all my projects that I've done, and I've done about 50 of them since I've been with Panorama, I've never seen a company where they just fire people. You may want to do a particular task with fewer employees, but then you want to be able to do more with the same number of employees. So usually the intent of these is usually to be able to grow your business without adding headcount. So it's not about reducing headcount, it's about keeping the same headcount but growing. So even if you're looking at doing something with fewer employees in one particular area, the key is understanding what those employees' strengths are in that area that's going to be impacted and where can you use those employees across the rest of your business. Sure, there's times where you may be getting rid of someone because of poor performance, but in general, and this might be an opportunity to do so, but in general, if you can find a place for that person or you understand what that person's career development path looks like, then you can help put them in a role after the implementation, another role within the company, doing something that's going to support your growth strategy. All right, so that takes us to the top of the hour. So I want to be respectful of everybody's time. Again, I really appreciate everyone for joining today's webinar, and I hope you learned a little bit about it. We'll have some future webinars on change management, specifically on steps and activities that you can take to help move you through these change management processes within your organization. Again, keep an eye out for a digital business transformation bootcamp, and I hope all of you have a great rest of your day. Thank you.